Yes, I've just checked it. I've lost the other video and I've just checked I've got that video. So I can carry on. I had to go and find this word I couldn't remember. Intertextuality. My university days. How can I forget that? Intertextuality implies sort of quite progressive anti-colonial ideas of saying, well, you might think of it that way, but how does a Indian or Muslim or person think of it, or a sort of untouched tribe in Africa or the Amazon or whatever it is, a sense of abroad, connecting up with other ways of seeing. It also, I think, implies that one has to be able to subject oneself to another way of thinking. And, you might be able to guess I'm talking about this kind of materialistic sense of the fad of gizmos and the buzz of techno thrill, the explosion of technology, which may not continue as the young people suggest, but may have run its course, except perhaps in terms of work space, robots taking away people's jobs. May not, of course, we don't know. But I like to say, well, you have to try and run that model of thinking that actually technology has plateaued. You have to run both models. You can't just run the assumption that technology will keep going in this hill, this incline. What if it doesn't? What if we go into a world that doesn't have this sense of we're going to move into this, to quote my rather disliked Hegelian idea, this historical endpoint of incredible solutions to everything, and those solutions being particularly as a result of this incredible technology, and everything will be fine because of technology. You have to be able to critique that idea. You have to run the other model. What if technology plateaus? What's our purpose? Every life must find its own purpose. It's not driven towards some great human endpoint in some technological world that is an endpoint of Hegelian perfection. Such a simplistic idea. It just seems, ever heard the French phrase plus ça change reste même? Well, everything changes, or I can't even translate it. All that changes stays the same. I can't even think. I've got that wrong somehow. Anyway, you know what I mean. Plus ça change reste même. The translation is a little indirect. So you, who in philosophy departments are caught up by the fad of science, in my view, and as I said, the techno buzz, I can't remember what I said. You need to be able to take in another perspective, and I would say that by belligerently saying I don't because it's not true is very poor philosophy, and there is another perspective out there, and you have to accept that there's another perspective, and that perspective is perhaps best described by the French literary criticism perspective, the idea of Marxism, religion, and the scientific perspective all being grand narratives. This is a very good theory. But what I came here to say was that we're going to sort of focus on particular words, and I think this word intertextuality is a brilliant solid rock within the field of French literary criticism that we can throw at, that we can stand on, but also it's a nice little rock, that we can throw at these precision obsessives. And by precision, I mean proof, basically. The idea of science having two definitions, one being I do a test with a control and my field of peers review it and do the test again. Right, that's one definition of science. I would say science is a word that is fought over in this idea of critiquing it as a grand narrative. Really is important to look at that word science. But there's another definition of science, and that is I have explained it to you. That requires you to listen, but also, like Wittgenstein, you read Wittgenstein, you say this guy is very precise. In philosophy, there is a lot of this. I will be very precise. There's almost, I'm getting a sense there's an aversion, and there's a need to constantly, in the world of left politics, I talk about signaling. You signal to your group, I am part of your group. In philosophy of this precision obsessed, you constantly need to be signaling, I am not part of that nonsense, black box, open play kind of thinking. And really what you're signaling is that, you're left wing, you're a historical materialist. I'm terribly modern. You have to be left to be modern. I'm only saying that on the basis that it's unacademic, not that I think you shouldn't be left. You should be able to critique both sides. But my thoughts have slightly run away with me. Yeah, I was getting a sense of an inability. Anyway, so intertextuality is a great word. It's a rock on which we can stand. These are deeply thought out concepts. This isn't just having a black box that means you can play to your heart's content and download every potential argument. This is the academic principle of scholarship on the basis of Plato. We propose a concept, we rattle it around together, we don't deny it on the basis that we can't prove it, but we thrash it out. And the ideas like intertextuality are absolutely fantastic, and that obviously deconstruction, great idea. The meta narratives, great idea. These are solid core aspects of philosophy now, and I really don't think you can just dismiss them as being unprecise and not part of your precise field, and that, all you're doing is a bit like a left-wing person who signals to their tribe, I am left, don't worry, I am left. You give these signals out and everybody feels relaxed, don't worry, he's left, he's not one of the nasty right-wing people. It's not academic, it's not philosophical, it's not sharply self-critical scholastic thinking, it's not good scholarship. And in the same way, these practical philosophers are signaling, I am part of this precision philosophers are signaling, I am not part of this wishy-washy literary criticism that talks about whatever it wants to. I am safe, don't worry, I'm part of your group. I'm constantly signaling I am part of the precision group. And that is all it is. It's signaling. That is the only reason why you think you're terribly precise, is because you're part of a group and they have signaled to you that they too are part of your group. So don't worry, we're safe. We're not going to be talking about anything that might be human. Oh, God forbid. We might actually respond to contemporary culture. It's just insane, really. Anyway, I'm just trying to find a charger. Now, what sort of timing have I hit now? As I've said in the previous one, I'm trying to do a series of sort of between 12 and 14 minutes. Oh, I've done 2 times 9, 2 times 10, that's 20 minutes. So yes, that's I've covered my 20 minutes there. Have I plugged it in? Have I got any power? No. Come on, you bugger. Oh, there it is. But I need to come to some kind of conclusion. If it's not clear, there's a first half and there's second two videos in this little sitting around chatting. I stopped it in the middle and it was about 10 minutes, but I couldn't find the right word. And then I found the word, so I didn't go off and think about anything else. I carried on my train of thought. I have to give credit to a funny website about someone called Nick Land, and on this front page it's called the same picture of Nick Land, and it's a picture of Nickelodeon Land. Anyway, Nick Land is from Warwick University and was very much the first British and Anglophonic rebellion against this sort of Wittgenstein and Precision and Russell and G.E. Moore and Vienna School, hatred of anything that doesn't signal this kind of left materialism, so-called logical positivism. It's just logicalism. In it, this guy on this little group on social media, Facebook, was talking about Nick Land from Warwick University. That, this is a small university, and they started not just being good Deleuzians. Gilles Deleuze is a theorist. They weren't being good Deleuzians. They were angry, and what he said, it had to be radical. Anyway, I like this guy, what he said, that can't overemphasize the importance for Nick Land with this idea of being radical. And by radical, it means whatever it is that's a power. And that's another thing I was going to talk about, was this idea of power. And to me now, what I'm saying is that this philosophical obsession with precision is a precision type thinking rather than precision. Precision is good. A precision type thinking is not necessarily good because it's not human. It doesn't respond to contemporary culture. It's not intertextual. So credit to him, because he was saying that about Nick Land and the idea that it had to be radical, which meant it had to be not just against the those that hated continental philosophy, but it had to be able to be radical about Gilles Deleuze as well, and not just be good Deleuzians. So that inspired me to go back and say, that's the last bit I've missed, which is this idea of Hegel, the despised Hegel, if I might even go that far, as being the end of old philosophy, and that instead of having a basis of science and this sort of assumption of, we're terribly modern, we're terribly precise now, we don't do that other group who talk about whiffly things. Instead of having that as our basis, these sort of signals to the group about how we're not part of them, don't worry, I'm part of your group. Instead, let's talk about a basis in old philosophy. And you might say, yes, but old philosophy doesn't say that. I disagree. You can't deny the existence of Plato. You can't turn Socrates' dialogue into logic and science, because Socrates based his thinking on the idea that you would get to certain points that are very different through dialogue. For instance, his idea of soul, and you can see the reflection of Socrates in Plato's theory of forms. You can't disconnect theory of forms from Socrates saying he had an idea of soul, goodness in the personality. That absolutely clearly theory of forms comes out of that idea, and that's Socrates' idea, and that's where he thinks he's going to get to. Why did Socrates get to that point? He's a response to someone called Maureen O'Sullivan said there was a big fight, a big dichotomy between the students, not necessarily Heraclitus himself, but the students of Heraclitus, who were very into the kind of, I think, sort of almost proto-scientific sense that you can't stand in the same river twice. You can't, if you can't prove it, it's not real, it doesn't exist. And Parmenides, who was on the side of when Pythagoras said that everything is in numbers and the most important number is one because everything is one. It's a monism. And he talks about the music of the spheres, music and harmony as an example. Big subject. But anyway, so look, Socrates is like a response to that dichotomy. He's, the thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Socrates is the synthesis of the dichotomy of Heraclitus and Parmenides. And you cannot just pretend that Plato doesn't exist and say we don't accept Plato. You cannot say Socrates doesn't exist, or even worse, Socrates' dialogue is logical. You cannot, if you accept Socrates, you have to say what Socrates is responding to. He's responding to Parmenides and Heraclitus. The numerology of Pythagoras is absolutely the center of everything, and Pythagoras himself, there was a bit of a weird one, didn't like beans or whatever it was. We think of Plato as having the first school, the academy, which is where we get the word academic. In France, they have the Lyceum, that comes out of Aristotle, the Lycée, I think it is, double E with an accent or something. But Pythagoras had a school as well. He is perhaps the father of philosophy. If you think of Thales and Anaxagoras and Anaximander as being a little bit kind of like, well, talking about water as the basic element. Yeah, whatever. This is a rebellion against a sort of right-wing religious Greek society that demands that it's all based on the myths, if you like. So in that sense, it's a first step in philosophy, which is, I think, independently. But the substance of what they're talking about, you can get into it. But I think if I was to try and suggest everything is water to your group of precision-based or precision-obsessed so-called modern philosophers, they just laugh. But what I'm saying is, you cannot dismiss philosophy. You cannot dismiss Plato, Socrates, the dichotomy of Heraclitus, his students, and Parmenides. You cannot dismiss Pythagoras, and there is where philosophy starts, and it potentially comes out of Ahura Mazda, the idea of the one, monism, nature as an example of monism. Thousands of books called On Nature, which is what this is my reference for what they're saying with this talking about nature. They always name their books On Nature, because nature is this example of, they always some people did, it seemed to be very common or quite common. Nature is this example of a monism. We admit that nature exists, and yet it is a monism. It's not, it's not that lion walking around on the savannah. It's an idea that all of this nature is one. It's a monism, and in the same way, there's a sense of a monism that's the opposite side of a dichotomy, in terms of you can't stand in the same river twice. Nothing is ever the same. You can't say anything because it's always changing. That's one very sort of dark side, which is really like chaos, and the other side is monism. Two sides of a dichotomy. I'm not saying either one's right, but Plato really, I think, is the resolution, the synthesis, because he says, that there is goodness, and that's the resolution of that dichotomy. Is claimed to have just merely written down what Socrates said. It seems a bit spurious, but it does come out of Socrates. You think of Plato as being terribly religious because Christians used him to justify Christianity, but I think you can also read him as a as a synthesis of this dichotomy of monism versus you can't stand in the same river twice, and Heraclitus and his students. So, this is why I'm saying that old philosophy going up to Hegel, obviously I know within the field there's a definition between classical philosophy and post-classical philosophy. Descartes being the father of modern philosophy, of post-classical philosophy. But I'm saying, Descartes really is so, what comes out of it is the idea of the critique, and that's just so deep in Socrates' dialogues. It's all about critique, and deconstruction is very much related to critique and dialectic. I can't believe Chomsky said, "I don't really know what the dialectic is." You're meant to be a philosopher. You go around telling everyone else what to think because you're such a great philosopher. You haven't even read what the dialectic is. You don't understand what the dialectic is. Oh, God. Anyway, excuse my blaspheming to those who mind Christians. Yeah, well done, folks. Keep going. So that's my reason why I'm saying if we say we now have enough time to say that Hegel is the cut-off point of old philosophy, you can't say old philosophy is your precision-based science stuff. You can't claim, Descartes was just off the wall when he started saying that his system proved the existence of God, and you can't say that him saying he experienced God before he was an adolescent, before he ever, saw the world. He's trying to suggest that this is a real thing, and you just say, well, he's just off the wall, he's mad, God doesn't exist. I don't think you can, just as you can't say Socrates was a logical system of dialogue, you can't say Descartes was, everything's now part of my system, because Descartes was systematizing it with, I think, therefore I am, and his 15 or 17 bases of philosophy of thought, and because he was afraid to, but he challenged the church a little bit and said, you must be able to critique the church. You turn around and say, that means he's one of us. Now we're going to turn Descartes into one of us. It's just, no, he was part of a movement. You've got to look at the history of philosophy. You've got to have an over-the-top, overhead view of the history of philosophy. You've got to look at it without your preconceptions. Descartes was not who you're saying he was. Just nuts. And yeah, okay, the true end of that path resulted in Locke, who was a bit of a socialist and sort of tore apart the religious basis of society, and became the basis of the French Revolution. Hume took this idea of empirical method to its larger end point, its larger conclusion. Kant loved it, read it, changed everything. He understood that Hume had made this sort of case point of the billiard balls and causality, and then he brought it back, and you can argue away, but German Romanticism comes out of Kant. He critiqued pure reason. It's in the title. Critique is in there. You have to be able to critique. He wanted to emphasize that critique is the core of philosophy, not materialism. He's sort of trying to do maths, almost like a mathematical proof that one can have a priori thought. It doesn't really work. I've listened to this series of lectures by a guy who's deep into it, and he's kind of hedging his bets, and then he's saying, well, in the postscript he did say that actually, well, it goes the other way around, and you don't know that unless you've read the postscript, and even when you go, yeah, okay, it goes the other way around, it doesn't make sense. I think he's wrong, sorry guys. But anyway, he's trying to prove, correct me if I'm wrong please, he's trying to prove or go through a process that says a priori thought, prior to experience, thought has a basis. As you will know, don't get caught up in it. Descartes is not an empirical. He's the rational. Yeah, so it's all about what I know in my mind is what's true and what's the basis of thought and of thinking. Whereas empirical is no, I go on what I get from outside. I only go on things I see in the world. And Hegel and Kant, I think, ignoring pro-science detractors, really synthesizes those two. And he talks about the sublime. Well, there you go. What more proof do you need? He's not a precision type philosopher. He's talking about art. He's talking about the sublime. Being in a storm as a way of discovering truth. The basis of philosophy. This is not about everything but being about precision science type proof. You can't stand in the same river twice. And the other thing is that he talks about morals and morality. I think he's absolutely right. Where does morality come in? You've got to have a moral theory in philosophy. And you talk about philosophy to people now, these philosophers, they pretend like the whole of Christianity doesn't exist. It's like, I'm going nuts here. They've just wiped out 1400 years of the history. You can't just ignore the whole of Christianity and then say, oh, there was Aristotle, and then you ignore Plato, and you ignore Socrates, and you ignore Heraclitus, and you ignore Pythagoras. It's like, just driving me nuts. What about moral philosophy? You've got to have moral philosophy. Christianity had a purity of the idea of God. Okay, there's a dichotomy. God exists, God doesn't exist. Monism versus you can't stand in the same river twice. What suggestion is there? Well, there is a suggestion. I've given you an argument. It's a dichotomy. And morality is why Christianity is part of Western philosophy. Yes, it's Western philosophy. Does Chinese philosophy have morality in it? Yeah. Do they have an idea of a god? Yes. There's many gods. There's heaven or something. There's a sense of a heaven, of another place, of leaving this space of chaos and pain, lack of organization. I'm referring to a Greek idea, the dichotomy between organization and chaos. Chaos is dark. No one has stepped in to save me. Organization is good. Someone has thought about it and acted and maintained the world, has acted to maintain the world and not let it fall apart into chaos. Is there morals in China? Yes. Is there a right wing in China? Yes. In Japan? Yeah, it's just so right wing. There's a dichotomy between the left and right, and you can't say that, Christianity doesn't get that other cultures don't have God, therefore Christianity doesn't exist. It's like Christianity is a moral system. You've got to have a moral system. You've got to have a moral philosophy to be a philosopher. In China, there is a right-wing, duty to the family idea of Confucianism, and in Japan, it's just the whole society is all about. There's different words for older people, and if you don't use that word for the older person in your job, even if they're useless at their job, and you're a doctor and they're a nurse. You've still got to talk to them in this terribly deferential, respectful way because they're older than you. This is absolutely a kind of right-wing controlling, strong society. It's very right-wing, and I'm saying you can't say Christianity isn't true because they don't have God in Japan. What they do have is a moral right wing, and we have a moral right wing. Christianity, for me, actually, in the depths, in the deep print, small print, no, in the depth of it, is actually kind of like a synthesis of the left and right, the journey of Israel, an example of an experience of a nation struggling with these warring, with these dichotomies that are just getting into a state of warring with each other. Don't go down that path. Follow a higher sense. Shakespeare explored dialogue, a dialogical way, and I'm talking about dialogical in the sense of Mikhail Bakhtin, which is what I studied at master's level. But the Bible has it too. There's this touching on dialogism. It synthesizes dichotomies. It finds an end to these dichotomies, to these wars, to these dichotomies that get fraught, and they finally get to war, and they're saying, learn the lessons, don't just repeat the same lessons. Hear, O Israel, don't make the same mistakes. I'm telling you now, this is what we experienced. I'm trying to teach you not to go down the same line over and over again. Learn the lessons. This is how I would like to propose a sort of non-left-right Christianity, or a philosophy that is more complex, rather, that is able to do a critique. You should be able to critique. You should be able to critique both. So all that is about the sense of Hegel and backwards as being old philosophy, and that's a firm, solid basis on which we can stand, rather than saying materialism is our basis or Marxism is our basis. Historical materialism, left wing, whatever sort it is, yes, okay, I'm only central left. I'm actually a liberal Democrat in this UK, sits in the middle and is much maligned. You can sit in the middle, but all you're doing is you're saying, don't worry, I'm part of your left club. No, you have to be able to critique the left club. You have to be able to critique the right club. It's a deeper philosophy than your left-wing, right-wing thing. And I think in Christianity too, I'm getting, right, sorry, I was trying to conclude this idea of the old philosophy, Hegel and backwards, as being a rock to stand on, in terms of truth. And all of this stuff that we can say is going on in terms of modern departments, philosophy departments, and this distaste for those that don't put the signalling out. They're all into precise philosophy of logic, basically, science in whichever definition, versus, I think, probably a philosophy that is best described by the French literary criticism bunch, particularly by the idea that Lyotard's grand idea of the grand narrative includes science, that we put up, he notices and points out that we put up grand narratives, religion, Marxism, and science. All these things are grand narratives. Science is included in those grand narratives. It's a power hegemony, to use the Foucault idea of power, and the Gramsci, the idea of hegemony, which is that he's a socialist. I'm a bit of a situationist, all that sort of rather gobby stuff from Gilles Debord, and other people after him, like a guy called Stuart Home. He made me think, I can speak. I just felt like I couldn't speak. Yeah. So we aggressively tell you that this precision fad of science is a science power hegemony. It is a grand narrative. We are against you. We're coming to get you. The war is on. um, we have good thinking. You can't just say that intertextuality is a stupid idea. We have solid ideas like that as a rock. And on the basis of old philosophy, I think we can start to stand in on that ground and have the fight. Literary criticism versus modern Anglophile, hyper-precise obsession with precision, philosophical schools, obsession with signaling your being based on logical truth and science. Come on, step out. Let me have you. All right. Thank you.